Wonderland. As far as what I'm working on now, very early on, so early I don't want to mention the author yet, just in case we fail. But our agents have talked, and we've written we've written 2,000 words of a YA novel, speculative fiction YA novel that we're going to attempt to co-write. So that's what I'm sort of excited about right now.
Let's pick a couple of things. I'm working on a long story that originated on Facebook where I posted a status where I used this as my picture, this kind of green plastic alien baby head, and pretended that I was going to a masquerade party, but it was actually the narrator of the story that was speaking, and it created a very interesting vibe with people who were disturbed, not sure what was going on, and responded in ways that allowed me to get the narrative going in ways that I didn't expect. And it now includes things like angels whose wings burn up on re-entry into the atmosphere, and Komodo dragons who are actually transdimensional portals through their poison glands. And it sounds crazy, but it may actually wind up being the best thing that I've ever written. and it's actually also going long, which is to say that I'm not sure now if it might actually be a novella or it might actually be a novel. I'm also working on a Romanian road novel about a band of musicians who get stranded by the promoter, who turns out to have ties to the Russian mob that has nothing to do with fantasy but will be very absurd. And the third project is The Kosher Guide to Imaginary Animals, which is a little quirky book that my wife and I have written, which is literally a bunch of debates about whether certain animals are kosher or not that are imaginary, including Pollo Maligno, which is a Brazilian spirit that's kind of like a chicken that's head periodically explodes into flame, and other things like that. And the best part of it, I think, is that we got on the phone with Duff Goldman from Ace of Cakes. If you're familiar with that show, and we asked him, how would you cook Cthulhu, or how would you cook Wookiee, or, and he has all these answers. Wookiee apparently would be very tough, so you'd have to braise it and marinate it for several days. But he also has some very poetic things in there, where he said, for example, that he thought the taste of evil would be like the bitter inside skin of a walnut. So there's all this really kind of cool stuff in this picture book that it's kind of expanded a little bit more beyond its scope. So I'm looking forward to those.
I have just finished a three-part story thing for the Wild Cards series of George R. R. Martin.
Excellent.
Yeah, thank you. It's for an upcoming book. Be a little while. I'm not sure when it's coming out. And I've just handed that in. There'll be edits and revisions, but that excites me. It was really fun writing about this sort of half-human, half-snake mutant boy with a sort of projectile tongue. It's alternative history wherein around the 1940s an alien virus was released on the Earth and made a lot of people into mutants. And it's been going for 23, 24 novels or book-length collections of stories, and it's still going. So that's kind of interesting to be involved in. In some ways, it's writing comics in a fictional form. On the other hand, there was also a story about a young African-American boy dealing with being rejected by his family and kind of coping with his solitude and finding his way in the city and his romantic interests. And so I like that. I am starting into the next Acacia novel. And you know what? After that, I'm really not sure. I've been having a hankering for large-scale historical fiction again, but I don't know if I'll go there or if I'll just stay in the fantasy world. I have some ideas, but I totally can't say them because that will doesn't feel like the right time to talk specifics.
There was another question back there, yeah?
Two-parter. First is for Paul. Why haven't you named something ambergris yet? And the second is for Jeff, which is why fungus?
Yeah.
Well, to be a little embarrassing. Not that embarrassing. I don't really care. What the hell? The first time I even ever encountered the word was in Jeff's fiction, like when I read it years ago. So I thought you made it up.
Oh, really?
So it's like I can steal from anyone, but I can't steal that. Yeah. So there you go. And,
fungus. I think it's people get the wrong impression about that, because often I have fans who offer me all kinds of mushrooms, and that's not really actually where it came from.
Any of those here tonight?
although I do have to say that the one limited edition copy of the Ambergris books I actually packed with dried mushrooms, and got two very different reactions. David Hartwell, I don't know if you're familiar with the editor at Tor, opened it, saw the mushrooms, didn't realize there was a book inside, just tossed it as soon as he saw the mushrooms. Michael Moorcock and his wife, Linda Moorcock, actually called me up and said, "Jeff, what kind of mushrooms are they? Are they the cooking kind or the other kind? Because I have a dinner to prepare and I think I can use these, but if they're not, I don't want to cook them with the other kind." You know, but the reason I think is, and the reason I also use the squid sometimes, is they both seem like alien organisms on this planet, and that kind of lends itself to fantasy. I mean, when you learn, for example, that certain kinds of mushrooms, if you seed the ground around them with little tiny iron filings, will eventually soak that up and become part iron. That's crazy. And also the fact that they were reclassified recently as being closer to I want to say human, but I mean animal than plants. I mean, that's also really kind of crazy. And so there's a lot of potential there, especially when developing fungus-based technologies. I mean, like the city has all these spore cameras now, like millions of them, and the joke is kind of like our own surveillance systems, that they collect so much information that they're years behind on actually evaluating it. And so there were also ways that I was able in this novel to make some kind of absurdist political statements about our current situation or past situation, using these things that don't seem like they really should be topical, but that would be why. I think we have time for like one more question that we can way in the back.
Yeah, I was wondering, this is for all of you, it's kind of, do any of your characters like talk to you in your head, or do you ever have a dialogue with your characters in a particular ward?
You know, I don't think I ever hear them, but the way I work is I tend to come up with the main character first, and try to build a story around them. And I build the story around them, or the particular character, by asking the character questions, not literally, "Hey Mark, what if this happens?" But you know, to me, that's the only way to know someone else. Like, you know, if you came with a friend, the only way you know them is through their actions and their dialogue. So I kind of approach it the same way. So while I don't actually hear their voice, I am constantly posing them questions like, what are you going to do if this happens, etc., and just kind of go from there.
On occasion, I talk to my characters, but they don't really talk back. Just silence.
I mean, there is this sense of that people have, or writers even say, of the character coming alive. I tend to think it's the whole narrative coming alive. It's not really the character. It's that every element or some element suddenly sparks something, and because the character is still a fictional creation, you know. But go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, I never feel like a character is talking to me.
Yeah.
I do at times feel like the story, though, for entirely random moments and random reasons, just, you know, something plops on me. And it's like, oh, I get it. That's why I put this knife on the table there, because you know, 400 pages later, I know what I'm supposed to do with that.
Yeah.
And that thing happens where it feels like I don't know where that came from, but it just arrived. So there's that.
It's like trusting your subconscious. Like, you're not sure exactly why you're doing something initially, but it'll make sense eventually.
And you have to be working. You know, you have to be trying.
Sure.
But something does seem kind of magical about that.
Yeah. And there's also, at least in this last novel, there was a sense of improv. I don't really do a lot of outlining, but for this novel, it's divided into 7 days, and for each day, I basically had a bunch of fragments of notes and things that I just kind of put in there, so I would have something as like an indicator. And what it basically began to become is that each scene had these prompts. Okay, I know these characters are going to be in this scene. I know what the general mood is, and because it's a murder mystery, I know more or less where the progression of the case is at this point. And that's all I would know when I wrote. And it was kind of like a director telling the actors the same thing, and then telling them to come up with the dialogue. And it was an interesting way to outline, because it gave me the space I needed and the discovery, but the discovery was more at the micro level of the details of the scene than the overall structure. Even though, I mean, the overall structure changed too as I went along, but it was just kind of an interesting approach for me personally, given that I have this aversion to outlining, but you need to have some kind of structure in place to be able to complete a novel. So, how are we doing on time? If we have one more pressing question, then we can quit and sign books. No? Okay.
You sure? Come on.
Yeah.
You know there's something you want to ask. Isn't there?
I might pull something from somewhere.